4th overall. 3rd in, or make it 2nd now in GT. Boris Said has taken over from Hans Stuck in Miller's 6th car. This is.
The NINCO and Fly BMW M3 GTR were purchased in 2003 from Mondialtec retailer. This is what Pierre Bertin wrote at the time in Auto Modélisme mag. One is ultra-detailed, maniacally reproduced right down to the inside. The other is more approximate. One has set off on the hazardous path of pure technical brutality. The other offers the most elegant of technical solutions, with impressive results. Never before have there been two identical models released at the same time, and with such a distant philosophy. A real textbook case. Fly always multiplies the details and their accuracy of proportion. Nothing to add except to admire the truly perfect interior and a perfectly treated novelty, the two front and rear tow hooks. At NINCO, although clearly improving in terms of proportions, it is roughly half as reproduced in terms of details. But the veil of paint is beyond reproach, which is unfortunately no longer the case with Fly. Fly powers its BMW M3 GTR even though it is in the standard range with its new, heavy and monstrous Fly racing engine at 25,000 revolutions per minute. Placed forward to allow the superb all-round representation of the interior, it drives the long axis that transmits the propulsion to the rear at an unreasonable rotational speed. To take Fly's reasoning a step further, to overcome the inertia of electric motors during each acceleration, you have to push harder. This is not necessarily a good solution because the more powerful the motor, the heavier its winding, and therefore the longer the inertia will take to fight. As for the extreme forward position of the large Fly engine, we will realize with the solution adopted by NINCO that it is not without parasitic effects. NINCO has not fallen asleep, or rather, they are finally waking up in Barcelona.
Applying a good old slot recipe, the attack of the 45-degree crown by the motor pinion, the Catalans find here, for the first time in the field of large-scale electric road circuits, the most elegant and clever solution to the inertia of electric motors. The more direct attack of the gears, at 45 degrees, relieves them of their mechanical constraints. The inertia of the acceleration of the big NC2 is partially absorbed by the structural weight on the rear axle and the grip of its wide tires. This clever position also fights against the parasitic effect that can sometimes result from the direction of rotation of a heavy engine when cornering or realigning during re-acceleration.
On the track, the Fly is still as fast as ever, but the car requires volts to get going again. It oversteers, but the front axle carrying the heavy engine accepts some madness during realignments.
With the NINCO, the contrast is striking. The accelerations are more frank. At 12 volts it swings, at 15 it attacks, and at 20 it's diabolical. With its very good suspension guide, the handling of this car is a treat.
Not quite enough as they head toward turn 7. There's Stuckey though on the outside. Takes a look there, and he won't be able to close the deal this time by either. Calvin Fish, you've been watching this GT battle, I know, from pit road. How do things stack up down there?
Only the number 42 machine of Jörg Müller actually changed the fresh tyre, and that really gave him some speed, and he immediately shot to the front of that pack. But I spoke to Tom Milner, who heads up the team PTG, the number 6 and 10 cars, and he said this is very much like the Audi customer cars in as much as that they have two of those BMW engines come to them. They have BMW engineers stand there. They don't even know what revs they're really running. It runs much like the light system on the Audi that you've seen on the in-cars, where they just see the lights come up. When it hits red, they switch gears. So it's a little bit of secrecy there from the BMW official factory, but certainly got good power in all four of those cars.
They do indeed have good power, and I think that's one of the controversies that the Porsche people are really upset about this car, because the V8 that is in this car is not similar to any other V8 by BMW in the whole world. It's a purebred race motor.
These are, you see where they stand right now. Let's get a little more on the drivability of these cars. Martin Haven standing by with one of the pilots for Team BMW.
JJ Leto, currently your car is leading the class, despite the fact that during the last yellow flag pit stops you came out in 4th place because Yogmiller took on some friends.
The big news with this car is that the familiar S-Can motor has been replaced with what appears to be the more powerful motor introduced in the fly racing Porsche GT198. It lives at the front of the car and drives the rear wheels through a parts box drive shaft and spring coupling. An 8-tooth brass pinion turns a 27-tooth plastic crown gear pressed onto an axle turning in bronze bushings. We were only a few minutes into our testing when we discovered that the normal bumps and vibration of racing can shake it loose. When that happens, the alignment of the motor, drive shaft and pinion gear goes awry and the pinion starts chewing up the crown gear in a manner similar to what happens on Vipers and some other front motor fly cars when the notorious drive shaft bushing pops out of its mount. Scale realism enthusiasts will love the abundance of detail on the body and in the interior. The radiator air intake in the front valence and the louvers on the hood are backed by fine screen. Other body details include towing rings front and rear, windshield wiper, rear view mirrors and fuel filler. Our test BMW returned a figure of 60 degrees on the FW magnet test, but on the track we found the magnetic grip to be more effective, to a point at least, than that figure would suggest. What Fly needs most right now is simply greater attention to detail in performance and build quality to match its efforts in scale realism. For now, a few easy fixes will turn the M3 into a capable, reliable and fun-to-drive car that looks good on the track and fills an important niche in anyone's collection of current endurance racing cars.
Well, Bill Adam has talked about how much fun it would be to drive one of these American Le Mans machines on the highway. This is the Golden Gate Bridge back on Wednesday.
I gotta save that quarter.
That's Bill pedaling the bicycle that our camera crew was using, I think, there. One of the PTG BMWs there, one of Kevin Buckler's Racers Group Porsches, and a little escort. There's the Saleen.
That's it, you're speeding fast.
Now we're on board with the number 10 machine. This is Bill Oberlin, who's worked his way up into the second spot in GT. And let's take a look, Jeremy, at some of the telemetry from this car.
Well, that yellow graph is the speed graph, and you can see it building speed up the back straightaway. Now, let's keep careful note of the speed through the S's of this GT car. They'll probably top that right around 150 to Hodge Stuck taking the win for Tom Milner's Prototype Technology team. Just an unbelievable developments throughout the field. But the biggest unquestioned Andrew is with the Panos.
A weekend of disappointment. We saw the number 10 car crash heavily with Bill Oberlin sidelined for the weekend, while the other car could only manage third fastest. Oberlin okay.
We at Little Bear Slots applied minimal changes to the two-fly BMW we have in the garage. The Daytona was tuned up in May 2005. Its magnet was kept but installed on a styrene shim to decrease downforce. 3 ballasts were installed, 2 in the middle and 1 behind the aft axle. The Yokohama Sears Point car is equipped with a bar magnet as recommended by Fantasy World. No ballast are added, and still it is 4 grams heavier than the Daytona car. Paul gauge tires were fitted on both cars in September 2023. Both fly cars have a similar setup with around 7 newtons downforce on the rear axle, which is twice as more as that of the 43 NINCO car. On the front axle, downforce is 150% higher than for the NINCO car. The NINCO cars are slightly heavier than the fly cars. Remember that one is equipped with the original NC2 motor delivering 18,100 revolutions per minute at 14, 5 volts and a torque of 263 gram-centimeters, while the other one has the more powerful NC10 motor. The NINCO 42 car, the one with the NC10 motor, lapped in 6.819 seconds on lane 3 and in 6.424 on lane 2. The 43 car with the standard NC2 motor was almost half a second slower, achieving only 7.226 seconds on lane 3 and 7.217 seconds on lane 2. Both cars had consistent runs, completing around 30 laps in the 5 minutes run. The Fly Yokohama car did 6.840 seconds on lane 3 and in 6.961 on lane 2, lap times that are very similar to those of the NINCO 42 car. We observed that the performance was affected by excessive rubbing of the front tires, to the extent that several dust lots were encountered in the SEs right before the Goodyear Bridge. The Daytona car did 7.167 seconds on lane 3 and 6.124 on lane 2, which is to date the absolute lap record on the Little Bear Slots track. It is better than the 6.263 second done by the NSR Martini Racing Porsche 917 in June 2024. This, not accounting for the 6.065 second on lane 2 by the Slot.it Sandeman Ferrari 512M with magnet installed.
Family, we congratulate. Oh, and a spin, the GT battle between the BMWs, the 6-car, Hans Stuck battling with the 42 of Jörg Müller. Stuckey turns the car around in the final quarter. It looks as though Müller will win the GT battle. Stuck may get second, but no. Dirk Müller's machine.
Number 23 machine, there is that battle. And I'll tell you, after what we saw at Sears Point, there's a lot of people tend to believe that that Yokohama tire might be the tire that might have the measure of Michelin here.
Well, Frederick Eklund really believed that the combination of the Yokohama and the BMW was very, very good.